Good day, Chief here for CTT. Yes, I'm a couple weeks late. Last week I was busy preparing for a trip that was supposed to have started yesterday, but country I was going to travel to had a do not travel. So I didn't want to risk getting partway and saying, nope, you can't go any further. We got to send you home. So as I stated at the beginning, when I went to Fort Stewart, or when I arrived at Fort Stewart, I shined as a squad leader. I had my trials, I had my tribulations with soldiers, and since this is my last assignment as an enlisted personnel, I could honestly say this is the most troubles I had with soldiers as an enlisted. Nothing really major, except the Louisiana boy that the first sergeant tried to, Other than that, I had fun, but I concentrated on my squad leader abilities like the first half of my tour there, and then it was time for me to start doing my putting together a packet to become a warrant officer. Now, this was not my first attempt. Prior to me leaving Hawaii and having a break from the difficulties that I had there for 3 years with court dates and custody fights, I finally went over with about 4 or 5 other individuals, and we went over to the Warrant Officer recruiter. I can't talk. And he was overwhelmed because he was a rotorhead helicopter pilot, and all of a sudden he had 5 or 6 military intelligence sergeants who wanted to become warrant officers, and he just kind of looked at us and like, wow. I don't remember if he actually said it or not, but he gave us all the basic information that we needed, and I started throwing my packet together. And then when I went back maybe a month or 2 later, and just being like 1 or 2 months shy of leaving Hawaii, he says, well, where's your physical? And I said, I thought you said only helicopter pilots needed a physical when we were here with that big group. And he says, oh, no. If I said that, he says, I misquoted. And he says, no, everybody needs a physical. And I'm like, well, I'm only 2 months shy of getting out of Hawaii. There's no way I'm going to get a physical thrown together. So like I said, I got to Fort Stewart, invested myself, and then finally came around time. So I went to my favorite warrant officer, and he says, yeah, just start throwing your packet together and show me your progress every now and then. That would come to bite him in the behind later on, because when I would report to Fort Huachuca after doing the basic course, I was asked why it took so long for me to put a packet in, but I'll get to that story later. So I didn't get any help. And there was about 10 warrant officers in the ACE at that time. And we had one new one who was a former E8, and he just became a warrant officer, so he was a warrant officer 1, and he didn't like me. And he didn't really outright say so. But when I went from Fort Stewart to the basic course and came back, because I wanted to tie up some loose ends, he said, I didn't think you were going to make it. He says, you have an attitude. Well, he was one of the first warrant officers when I did develop another warrant officer attitude. I got tired of listening to warrant officers becoming warrant officers after me, and basically would do the old fishing pole, and they would say, 20 years and a wake-up. And I would be like, what? 20 years and a wake-up, I'll be fishing. I said, oh, great. That's not the reason to become a warrant officer. They just did it to get more money for their retirement. Now, basically, this master sergeant, when he became a warrant officer, he actually took a pay cut, because master sergeant at his time in service, he took a pay cut. But of course he would have a bigger check when he did retire, and he was probably one of those 20 years in a wake up, because he probably only had about 4 years left to go. So I didn't have really too much difficulty, but had troubles getting my packet together. I thought it had it together at one time, did my physical, and then I went back to my mentor, so to speak, and nope, didn't have it all together correct, and so my physical expired. I think they're only good for like 6 months when you submit the packet, so I had to get that rescheduled again. And in the interim, a warrant officer arrived from Hawaii that I knew that served there too. And he became the main mentor because he was a CW3, everybody else was a 2 and below. So he was the one that had to write my warrant officer approval letter. But he was upset with the warrant officers. He said, I don't like the direction they're going. He says, that's why I'm retiring. He says, they're trying to make third lieutenants out of us. And he was correct. They tried to make third lieutenant out of me, I don't know how many times. And actually a captain one time, so to speak. But I'll talk about that situation when I get over to the warrant officer side of the house. So he did the letter with reluctance. I didn't mind. But my first mentor, he set me up. One day while we were talking about my warrant officer packet, he was asking me about, yeah, you just came from Hawaii when you came here. He says, you know the names of any warrant officers that you worked with? And I mentioned the 2 that I worked under in my section because the first one was a CW2 and he did not make CW3 and he had to get out at 17 years and he was mad. And he came to the conclusion the reason why he didn't make CW3 was because he did not have a degree. He didn't even have an associate's. But he said the other 2 warrant officers that he was in competition with both had degrees. So he says, okay. So he was really mad because he had to retire at 17. So things like that can happen. That was kind of my reluctance too, because when you first become a warrant officer, you are an active reserve. And of course, I didn't know what that I know what that meant, but I didn't know the procedure, and then I come to find out, basically, Congress has only so many officer slots. And those officer slots, of course, go from the top down, so all the generals are regular Army, all the colonels are regular Army, all the lieutenant colonels are regular Army, and I think there's enough slots for the majors to be all Army, and then probably a few left over for some of the captains to be regular Army. So all the other junior officers are like warrant officers. We are active reserves because they have an obligation or they have a commitment, they have a slot for us, so therefore we are active. And that kind of scared me because I didn't want to be in that situation where this other warrant officer was in. And that scared me a little bit when I first got to Hawaii because that happened within a year. Then I got a CW3 who was just a crazy, and I'll meet him later towards the end of my career. So I got my packet together, and it took a while, and then I went on vacation, and then I came back from vacation. I did it like early summer, I think it was, late spring, early summer. I went on vacation my final year at Fort Stewart, and I came back, and all my fellow enlisted members were like, hey, congratulations, you made the warrant officer list. And I said, I did? And I didn't get it out, and I bought 2 copies of the U.S. Army Times where my name was in there and said that I got approved for the warrant officer basic course. About a month after that, I came down on orders. Now here's the funny thing. The branch manager for my enlisted, I can't remember his last name, has a brother who will also become one of my branch managers when I become a warrant officer, because when he became a warrant officer, it was just kind of, when I became a warrant officer and I saw this name as my branch manager, because they change once a year. They're only in that job for a whole year, and then they're gone. Saw the name, and then he says, oh yeah, that was my brother on the enlisted side. I'm like, oh, okay. So, but the current branch manager I had at that time, it was a female, and I can't remember who it was. And for the warrant officer side, I had to call her because when I got my orders to go to warrant officer basic course, I didn't have orders for my first commitment to become a warrant officer. And she goes, oh, I didn't do that? She says, I got you Fort Lewis. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Washington State. I didn't mind. So, as I said, I came down on orders, and I came down on orders to go to DIA, the Department of Intelligence, the Army, which is up in Washington, D.C. I don't like the East Coast, and I particularly don't like the D.C. area. I did not want to go there, especially with being a father with 2 single kids. I did not want to go there. So I called my branch manager up. This is before email and all this other fun stuff. And he goes, oh, no, I really didn't see that you made the warrant officer list. Well, you got to write me a letter telling me why you can't fulfill this assignment so I can give it to somebody else. And I said, I just told you. He says, yeah, but I got to have written proof. I said, oh, so I'm supposed to do your job for you? And he says, basically, yes. I thought, okay, I just informed you verbally. So, but I had to write him a letter. And then in the interim between those 2 events, I got an offer, believe it or not, to join Delta Force, which shocked me. They had a recruiter come down, and I didn't even know that Delta Force would have my MOS as a requirement. Now, back when I was at Fort Stewart, I was a little bit skinnier, a little bit lighter, and I was more physically fit than, of course, now at retirement age. So I contemplated it, but being a single parent with 2 children, there's no way I could do that because, you know, if I made it, I don't know when I was going to be home. I didn't know when I was going to be gone. I didn't know how long I'd be home for, and I was like, gosh, I can't do that to 2 kids. I mean, it was an opportunity I would like to have tried out, but yeah, I didn't want to injure myself because you cannot become a warrant officer as if you have any profiles. Now, I had my P2 for my tendinitis that was issued to me when I basically failed Diddy Bop school, Morse code. That was the only reason to drop me because my instructor said, you're too good of a student, so I can't drop you academically, so we're going to have the doctor do it and just give you tendinitis. And like I said, I had a good first sergeant at Fort Riley. He made me go down and take a hearing test, and they're like, there ain't nothing wrong with your hearing, so I got that P2 removed, which was good. Otherwise, I would have been scrambling to get that done. And so I got my warrant officer packet together, and it was approved, and now it was about 6 months before I'm leaving Fort Stewart to become an officer. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't know, I'll probably do a wrap-up of Fort Stewart because I had headaches there trying to get out of that place. But remember, this is Chief. Freedom is not free. Thank a bet, hug a bet. Please, please do so. They deserve it. Some of them are homeless, and some of them just need a friendly gesture. There's a Vietnam vet, like I said, down the street. Whenever I see him, I thank him. Chief out.